Well, hi folks, it's Dr. Joel Hunter here, broadcasting from undisclosed location for my students at Truckee Meadows Community College taking Intro to Ethics, Philosophy 135. Thanks for tuning in. Guys, if you want to throw up some hearts just to indicate that you're here, I've got kind of a wonky system set up. I'm using an iPad mini instead of my phone, and to hopefully get a little better picture. But the trade-off is that I'm not able to see the comments, but I'm going to make an adjustment when we get to Q&A for that. Today, what I want to go over with you are the readings that you're going to have, and specifically what's going to be on the quiz. And then I want to talk about your mini argument assignment, and we're going to be looking specifically at the paragraph module. So we're going to talk about that, and I want to break down the grade for you, what that's going to look like. And that's it. I want to cover those things today with you and have plenty of time for Q&A. So I hope you're ready to go. I am. So glad you're here. And if you would, just anytime you have a question, if you would lead with a couple question marks, that would be great. And I'll do my best to see them. I may have to make a little adjustment here just so that I can see comments. I'm not sure which side they're going to come on. If I could get one viewer to send me a comment or a question real quick, that would be really helpful, just so that I make sure that I have it lined up where I'm going to be able to see it. So could I get somebody to send a comment through? Hiya. Very good. Thank you. All right. So this is interesting. It's going to be portrait. I wonder why that is. Anyway, it's fine. I hope that I'm coming through in landscape. I'm not sure if I am or not, but hopefully I am. So anyway, let's get on to the readings. So you have two selections. One is from your Fundamentals of Ethics reading. That's chapter 6, and that is on natural law. Fairly straightforward reading this time, I think, and I'll break it down for you just briefly. The second reading, however, is going to be tougher because it's an actual philosophical article, contemporary philosophical article written by Philippa Foot. And that is in your other book, The Ethical Life, chapter 7. So I'm going to talk briefly about that as well, and a couple things that you should focus on, and a couple of things to help steer you through that. All right, so let me get to that. You have on your quiz for this week on these two readings 20 questions. 16 of them are from the Fundamentals of Ethics, from the Natural Law chapter. So just so you know how that breaks down. So that leaves 4 questions from the Philippa Foot reading in The Ethical Life. If I have some advice for you, I don't know why I do so much. I do and ah. I'll get over it one day. Okay, so last week I had suggested to you in an impromptu Periscope that you do close reading, that you look at the handout, the online article that I wrote for you about how to do close reading. And I want to stress, again, success in the quizzes is directly tied to the close reading that you do. So close reading requires that you pay attention to key terms, that you look at specific claims, that are argumentative claims, and try to understand them. That's what's difficult. But if you will read the selection carefully, I know that you can succeed on this quiz. Your 16 questions that are taken from the Natural Law chapter, once you read the questions carefully, about 8 of the questions are taken from pages 77 through 79. That's the early part of the reading. And then there's about 3 questions that require you to apply the principles and ideas that you've read about in the chapter. So if you know my quizzes yet much at all, you know one thing that I do is I will often put arguments that I've created and ask you to evaluate them. So I've got a couple of those kinds of questions. So arguments that you won't find explicitly in the book, although the concepts and the claims are there, just they're reworded differently. They're just paraphrased. And what I'm asking you to do in those questions is apply the knowledge that you gained from the close reading of the text in order to evaluate those arguments. And I think one is a multiple choice and the other is a true-false. So those are ones that you can't simply look up information in the book to get it right. You have to actually use the knowledge that you've gained. Hence, again, just to say it again, close reading is your friend. There I did again. So yes, your Philippa Foot reading, I want to give you a heads up about that one because you do not have to understand all of that essay. It's actually rather hard. It's all pretty difficult and challenging for an intro-level course. However, with the exception of pages 68 through 70, this is a section on pages 68 through 70 where she is analyzing Michael Thompson's argument. And a lot of that has to do with some formal logic applied to natural law theory plus Aristotle's system of categoricals. Okay, you do not have to know that. You do not have to know Aristotle's categoricals. And in fact, I think that I have put the quiz together. There's only 4 questions from the reading. But I put the quiz together in such a way that if you skip over that section, pages 68 through 70, you won't miss anything that you need to know for the quiz. So do feel free to gloss over that. It's difficult stuff. It's rewarding stuff if you want to take it on. But I want you to know that you don't have to have a real good grasp of that. So that's the heads up I want to give you about that part of the quiz. Okay, so those are your readings. And there's more to say about natural law theory than what is in this chapter. It's a good introduction. And it is just that, though. It's an introduction. There's actually a lot of variety within natural law theory. The Philippa Foot is a great example of a contemporary philosopher who is a natural law theorist, but not explicitly, at least in your reading, theistic. A lot of natural law theory is tied to theism. And if you look at the history of natural law theory, you can see that you can trace that history back to theism. But you really don't get an appreciation, I think, for that tradition in the reading. But then again, that's harder reading, and that is something that you can look into if you're interested in natural law theory. It is an interesting theory. One of the things that makes it interesting is that it is tied to empirical claims that we can test with science, for example. So if we understand how an organism behaves, then we can connect what makes that a good or a bad organism, or a good or bad representative of a species, something like that. So there's an important point there that I just mentioned, and this is related to about 4 or 5 questions that are going to be on your quiz that deal specifically with this connection between stating what is the case, or claims that are about what is the case, descriptive claims, for example, and how they connect, if at all, to normative claims. Remember, this is a normative theory. Natural theory is normative theory, and norms are saying what ought to be the case, what you should do. So how do we go from what is the case to what ought to be the case? And probably the majority of philosophers think that that's an unbridgeable gap. And David Hume was the first one to articulate this in a systematic way. So the difficulty of connecting is and ought has been a philosophical problem for philosophers for quite a while now, for 300 years, say. But the natural law theory always was present to say that that gap can be crossed and is crossed with its theory. And so new versions, contemporary versions of natural law theory will always have in the background an understanding or an awareness of this problem that Hume left us with, of the is-ought gap. And so I want you to be aware of that. That's a really key part of your reading, and several of your questions will be dealing with that issue. So that's one of the attractions of natural law theory, is that it, by making a set of empirical claims, it purports to tell us then how we should behave, how we should live, what is valuable. And that's a very powerful tool, if it's true. All right, that's all I want to say about natural law theory and about your quiz. And I wanted to now just ask you if you had any questions about the reading and what's coming up on the quiz, or past quizzes. I'll take a few seconds here to pause. Getting a lot of sunshine over here from my window, so that's why I look glowy over here. Any questions? Questions? Yeah, I can't tell just from my setup here whether I look sideways to you or not. Shouldn't, but if you want to tell me that I'm sideways, I'd love to know it just for future reference. Comments, questions? Okay. Well, I hope that's useful to you. I want to now turn to your mini argument assignment. And you're now going into Module 3, which is the paragraph. And now you're going to build on what you did in the evidence module and the thesis module. And you're going to write a full-blown rough draft paragraph. Before I get into the specifics of that, I want to mention the grade breakdown for how I'm going to score your assignment. Now, it's worth 13% of your grade, the whole thing. Excuse me. What I've decided to do is take each module that you've turned in, and that is going to be worth 1% of that 13. Then your peer review, the feedback that you give to your group members, is going to, each time you do that, is another 1%. So 3 modules plus 3 rounds of feedback makes 6%. And that means the remaining 7% is going to be for the final draft that you turn in on by October 12th. So that's how the grade's going to be broken down. Now let me say something about the paragraph module, Module 3. Here, all you're going to basically be doing is taking the 2 things that you've done so far and expanding on them. For some of you, I've noticed, you won't have to do that much expansion because you've actually written quite a lot of explanation around your evidence and around your thesis. And that's good. I'm glad you did that, because now it's going to be a lot easier to synthesize what you've already done and pull it together into a coherent paragraph. That's your job. Now, I've given you in the assignment handout a structure for the paragraph, and I want you to put the first sentence of the paragraph, I want you to make that your topic sentence. And in the topic sentence, you need to be able to state what it is that you're going to try to prove in that paragraph. So the way I've worded it in your assignment is, in this paragraph, I will show that X is the case. Now, the X is the case comes from your thesis. So that's your answer to the question that you chose. And what you're going to do after you put the topic sentence down then is you're going to provide the basis, the evidence and the reasons that support that answer. So that's the idea. And what you're doing then is, from the thesis, you also gave reasons and evidence there. And what you want to do then is expand on that in the discussion in the body of the paragraph. Okay, so you have this main claim that you're trying to prove, right? You're giving some answer, say, to moral skepticism about why you think it is or isn't true. And then, well, what are the grounds for that? Then you are giving the reasons for that, and you've already done that part. And you've quoted the text to support your ideas. And what you're doing now is you are quoting that material again, and you are discussing it and making it clear how that quote supports the particular reason that you are talking about. Okay, so the thing to remember about this is you're relying on textual support for your argument. You're also relying on your own ability to reason, and that will come through as well. But I want to focus for a second on how you're using the text. Here's the sort of takeaway point, the main one, and that is that quotes, especially say from a literary text or from a difficult text, they don't speak for themselves. You have to unpack them. And by unpack, I mean draw out the key parts of the quote, explain what's going on in the quote. And here's the other part. This is where your reasoning comes into it now. In your explanation of what's going on in the quote, what it means, interpretation, you are also at the same time connecting it to the point that you're making. So you think the quote, and you've already done some thinking about this in your prior assignment, you think that quote supports some point, right, that you've made, some reason that helps establish your main point, your answer to the question. Okay. The question is, though, can you explain to the reader how that quote supports and connects to what you think it means and what you think its importance is for supporting your point? You see what the issue is there? It's not enough to say, well, here's what the author thinks. That's part of what you've got to do. Here's what the author thinks. But what you have to do is also say why that's important, or how does that support your point. The way I like to summarize this is to stress that what you're doing is you are trying to show, not tell. You are trying to show how the text, the evidence, supports your point, not tell us that it does. We already assume that it does because you're quoting it. What your job is to show how it supports your point. And to show it, you have to make a connection between your explanation of what the text is saying and the point you think that it makes in your favor for your argument. Okay? I've gone over that probably in like 3 different ways here. I hope that's clear. But that's a really, really crucial point that I want you to start to be intentional about when you write this paragraph, this draft paragraph. Okay. So you're quoting the text, you're explaining that text, you're connecting it to your argument, and all of this can be done in about 300 words, a page. So that is your assignment for this week. Module 3 is to write a paragraph, an argumentative paragraph, that develops your thesis that was your answer to the question that you started with at the very beginning of this assignment. Okay? Cool. Good. I hope that is clear enough. All right, the second part of your task of this week is to do the peer review. Now, the peer review this week is far more structured. I've given you, in fact, three explicit questions that I want you to answer for your group members' paragraphs. And so let me just read those off to you, what those 3 questions are. Okay, again, as always, by the way, you're focusing on the logic of the argument, you're looking at the reasoning of your team member, you're not looking at grammar and punctuation, stuff like that. Okay, so question number 1 that you answer in the peer review. Does the thesis, and that's the topic sentence, answer the question selected by the student? Okay, so here's one thing that will be helpful to do for all of you when you write your 3rd module. Okay, this is your paragraph. If you would, this will help your peer reviewers out, your group people out. If you will please put the question at the very beginning, at the top, maybe even in the header if you wish, or I don't even know if Google Docs does headers. Anyway, put the question at the very top of your page, and then start your paragraph. Okay, and that will enable your reviewers then to be able to see and to respond to how they think that the thesis has answered the question. Actually, all I'm asking for in question 1 is, you as a reviewer, do you think that the thesis answers the question that the student selected? Okay? So that's question 1. Question next, is the thesis contestable or controversial? What does this mean? Does the thesis take a position that others might disagree with? Now, I don't mean just any old random person off the street. What I mean is another informed reader of the text, of the same section that your question is drawn from. Would an informed reader, someone who is familiar with the concepts and the arguments, could they possibly disagree with the claim in the thesis? That is what, if you can, then that's what makes a thesis contestable and controversial. That's what you want. You want that because you want to be able, in the body of your paragraph, show that your argument is a good argument. You want to be not necessarily persuasive, but you want to at least give a plausible account for your answer. Okay? So, question 2 then. Is the thesis contestable or controversial? So yeah, again, I want to come back to something I said earlier about how you integrate the quotes from the text into your paragraph. You are, again, the text does not speak for itself. You have to unpack it. You have to discuss it. You have to explain not only what it means, but how that meaning is connected to your point. Okay. So what happens if a thesis is not controversial, it is not contestable, more than likely, all that's going on is an argument that basically says, here's what the author says. Okay? It's not actually your own argument, but it is simply reporting what the author has said, or what the text says, or what your authority says. Okay? So that's what you want to avoid. You do not, although you have to understand the author and explain what the author said in those quotes, the idea and the reasoning and the answer is yours. And so it needs to be clear that this is not simply reporting what the author says, but you are arguing for your ideas, your position. Okay? So that's question number 2. Is the thesis contestable or controversial? Question number next, the third and final question that you need to answer, is the thesis specific enough? What you want to do here is identify especially very broad, ambiguous terms. Now, you've actually read enough, and you will see this in spades, actually, in this particular chapter, in chapter 6, on natural law. You will see the dangers of wielding terms that are crutches. And it's not that they couldn't work for you, but they're often so vague or broad that they don't really say much. Words like successful, words like natural, just to take the example from this last reading, from this week's reading. What you need to be able to do, if you think those terms are helpful, is, let's just take successful. Successful in respect of what? Successful measured how? Measured what? Physically? What, cause and effect success? Moral success? What kind of success are you talking about? So success in respect of what? Oftentimes, if you think through those sort of vague, catch-all, abstract terms, you'll often be able to identify a better term, a more specific term. And so that's what I want you to do as a reviewer, is I want you to circle any, I guess you can't circle, highlight any of those terms that you think aren't really helping the claims be specific in the argument. Okay, so that is number 3. Is the thesis specific enough? Okay, that's it. That is your job in the peer review, is to answer those 3 questions. And so you, as the writer of the paragraph, what you're going to get back are several responses from your group, helping you hone then your thesis and paragraph. And what you'll do after this is over, starting with next week, you will then develop it into a final draft of the paragraph, and that will be your mini argument assignment, completion, final, over, and that'll be due October 12th. Okay, so just to be clear now, I want the Module 3, the paragraph, to be done by the end of the week. Let's make it Sunday. and get your peer review done of Module 2, of your group members Module 2 by the end of this week. And that's it. That's your assignment for this week, is the readings on natural law, and then Module 2 peer review, Module 3 paragraph. All right? Very good. Well, that is what I want to cover with you today. Are there any questions? There's only a few of you left, I think. Not entirely happy with the video setup I've got here. It's kind of wonky. Any questions, folks? Any questions? Let's see how we're doing on time. Yeah, I've got a couple minutes if y'all want to ask a question. Guess not. Yeah, I guess that's right. Okay, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and there may be another impromptu session this week. Who knows? And if not, though, I'll see you on the next session next week. And I will be. By the way, let me just make one final comment on the assignment that you've done so far. My plan is for the modules, for you to do the modules on your own, with a little bit of guidance from me here, and for you to use the peer review as a way to hone and improve your modules. And then in that period, when you've actually done the 3 modules and you've done the peer review of the paragraph, that'll be next week, I want you, I will be providing you additional feedback. So if there are things that I see that are going to help you turn in the final or complete the final mini argument assignment, then I'm going to inject those comments for you and give you some guidance there too. So I just want you to know you're not going to be thrown out, without feedback from me on this. So be looking for that. All right then. I'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and take care. I'll see you online.